The leaders of Britain, France and Canada are warning of action against Israel if it doesn't stop its military assault and the blockade of Gaza is lifted. In a joint statement, they said the Israeli government's denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable. It risks breaching international humanitarian law. The statement says, "We will not hesitate to take further action." Well, Hamdah Salhut joins us now from the Jordanian capital, Amman. She's there because the Israeli government has banned Al Jazeera from reporting inside Israel and the occupied West Bank. And Hamdah, we've got this statement I mentioned from the leaders of those three countries, also foreign ministers of EU countries issuing a statement. Any reaction from Israel to all this flurry of statements?
Well, there hasn't been any reaction from Israel just yet, but it's worth mentioning this flurry of statements that's come in just in the last hour. The first was from the human rights chief of the UN, saying that while Israel has allowed a quite partial and minimal resumption of humanitarian aid, this is just a drop in the ocean. But that's not the main statement that's causing a lot of buzz. The main one here is the UK, France, and Canada saying that they would take measures, including sanctions, against Israel if they, one, did not stop their military actions in Gaza, two, did not lift the blockade on humanitarian assistance for Palestinian civilians, and three, continued their expansion of illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank, which is a topic that many countries have seemed to have forgotten about, that Israel has been expanding these illegal settlements under the guise of war, passing these policies in the Israeli parliament, while all of the focus was on Israel's war on Gaza. So it's interesting to see exactly how this is going to play out. But the third statement we received has 25 different signatories. Many of those countries are allies of Israel, calling on the Israeli government to do more when it comes to humanitarian assistance, to do more when it comes to humanitarian aid, saying that what they have been doing is simply not enough, that they are cutting off the population entirely inside of Gaza, and that it's Israel's responsibility to do so. Otherwise, they are breaching international law, something I might add that Israel has been accused of throughout the entirety of this war.
Thanks so much to Hamdah Salhut there, joining us live from Amman. As we've been hearing, the statement from the leaders of France, the UK and Canada, well, they came as foreign ministers from over 20 Western countries in the EU who are providing aid to Gaza, also criticized Israel. In a joint statement, they said, "As humanitarian donors, we have two straightforward messages for the government of Israel. Allow a full resumption of aid into Gaza immediately and enable the UN and humanitarian organizations to work independently and impartially to save lives, reducing suffering and maintaining dignity." Let's speak now to Step Vaessen. She joins us from Amsterdam. So basically, reading between the lines there, Step, are we seeing EU foreign ministers say they're not going to work with this new American-Israeli mechanism for distributing aid?
That's exactly what it is, Sammy. 22 foreign ministers have actually signed this decree, this statement. EU ministers, but also Canada, Australia, also from the Baltic states. They write out rejecting this so-called new model that Israel has introduced of distributing aid to Gaza, saying, according to Netanyahu, that this will only be done at regulated and controlled distribution points controlled by the IDF in Israeli conquered territory. So according to these foreign ministers, this is completely unacceptable because humanitarian aid should never be politicized. It should be equal for everyone. It should be accessible to everyone. So these ministers are saying we demand Israel to enable aid to go into Gaza for everyone. And we also say that it should be impartially have access for all the UN people and also other humanitarian organizations to work again in Gaza. So this is all coming ahead of a very important foreign ministers meeting tomorrow in Brussels, where the EU will discuss again its position on Gaza. What we're seeing is definitely some kind of shift after 1.5 years of ongoing bombardments on Gaza. This food situation seems to really have led to public outcry, especially also here in Europe and also in the Netherlands. We saw around 100,000 people on the streets in The Hague on Sunday, and many of them told me it's especially these images of people starving in Gaza that really now is changing the position, and it's really putting pressure on these governments. So the Dutch government will ask now tomorrow the EU to review an important free trade agreement the EU has with Israel, and also Sweden is asking for sanctions on Israeli ministers. So you see that this food situation is really leading to some kind of shift here, and many people here in the EU are hoping that the governments are going to go a step further than they have been doing so far.
Thanks so much, Step Vaessen there, updating us from The Hague. Well, Francesca Albanese is the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories. Joins us now live from Tunis. Good to have you with us. So first of all, Francesca, let me get your reaction to this announcement by the leaders of 3 countries, Canada, France, the UK, talking about how they are ready to take further action if Israel doesn't stop the military assault and if it doesn't allow aid in. A positive step?
Look, had this statement been made 1 year, 14 months ago, I would have welcomed it. It would have been yet 2 months too late. But now, 1 year and a half later, of course, this is the minimum bearable. Seriously, of course I welcome it. But I also agree with what the speaker was before me was saying. This is the result of the enormous pressure that ordinary citizens in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Germany, in France, everywhere, especially in the Western world, in the US, are putting onto power. And again, I'm afraid that these statements are not supported by actions, because until last evening, I read from reputable sources that the UK were flying over Gaza, possibly collecting intel for Israel, as they have reportedly been doing for months now from their military base in Cyprus. And just yesterday, a flight from Cyprus has landed, a cargo flight has landed in Tel Aviv. So again, yes, words are fantastic, but at this point, we need action.
What action do you call on these countries to take, who are saying, at least, that they're ready to take action? What should they do?
What all the international human rights community has been saying, and what some leaders from the Global South, like South Africa, the members of the Hague Group, and recently Spain have said, and Spain is about to vote sanctions and full arms embargo on Israel. Again, this is late, Sami. This should have happened before. Had it happened, we would have prevented Gaza from turning into a meat grinder, because let's be honest, this is what Gaza is today. And it's so worrisome that these small words, targeted sanctions here and there, what does it mean? Targeting whom? You need to impose the sanctions on the states. It's not about the prime minister. This is the entire government enterprise supported by the army and frankly, there is a large components of the society as such, which are supporting this plan, while others, a small part, but shouldn't be invisibilized, of the Israeli society, has started to protest regularly against the genocide, up to going to the border. Yesterday, there were Israeli activists arrested, and they did the most meaningful thing, going to the to the crossings between Gaza and Israel. These are the crossings where the international community should be doing, not Rafah, which has been seen as by many as the gate to the next exodus of the Palestinians. Open the crossing between Israel and Gaza and let all the necessary aid in, and not through this, whatever it's called, this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is one of the most appalling things I've seen in my entire career, bypassing an architecture that exists in the international community at the multilateral level to deliver aid under, of course, it's under the guidance of the United States and Israel. Since when a country which has committed international crime is allowed to reign against the self-determination of the people, which is just genociding? So you see, there is so much wrong that words of condemnation here and there right now are definitely not sufficient.
Okay, you've been clear in calling for these three countries to take concrete steps like sanctions, some of the steps which the Global South leaders you mentioned have been calling for. What about the US? Can any measures taken by these countries be really effective without similar action from the US? What do you call on the US to do?
Look, I know that we, especially in the last 20 years, we have become incapacitated to imagine leading ourselves as human beings and as countries other than under the tutelage of the United States. But the premise must remain international law. We must be guided by universal values and universal norms, which today, when it comes to Palestine, the United States is not very keen to respect. Therefore,
right, but even Francesca, even if you're right, of course, international law should be applied, but everybody knows that the main backer for Israel's, particularly its military operations, is the US. Can it be effective without action from the US? And what should Arab countries do? Some of them have relations too with
what about the other
Israel.
191?
Right. Well, you know, what should are Arab countries doing enough? We've just seen
of the international community. No, but this is where the people, Sami, we need to understand that this is really, it's a landslide moment. People from all over the world, millions of people, have been protesting against the very repression exerted by their own countries. Again, I repeat, in the UK, in France, in Germany, in my own country, Italy, people have been fired from their jobs. People have been arrested and detained for asking the end of a genocide, the end of crimes committed against women and children. So the people cannot stand this anymore. There are so many people, and increasingly so, who are putting things really in the line.
Right.
And this is, for me, this is the only ray of hope right now. Will the people be able to reorient politics? This is the question mark. I do believe that this is a moral obligation that all of us have to make sure that governments respect their legal obligations under international law.
Thank you so much, Francesca Albanese, United Nations Special Rapporteur.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.